Have you ever wondered what lies beyond death and what is about to happen to humanity? In today's video, you will hear the shocking story of a woman who died, and on the other side, saw the apocalypse begin. She witnessed the financial collapse, the global blackout, and a cosmic wave that arrives at the end of May 2025, bringing truths that will shake the world. So leave your like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and comment here which city you are watching this video from, because this message needs to reach as far as possible. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm 42 years old, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I never imagined that a perfectly ordinary morning would turn into the day that would mark the end of my life, and at the same time the beginning of something I'll never be able to describe without shuddering inside. It was May 5th, 2024. The sun was already high, the sky was clear, without a single cloud. I was in my car like any other day, driving along Interstate 10 heading to work. I remember thinking about the bills, the report I needed to finish, and even what series I would watch that night. Everything was absolutely banal. That's when, suddenly a sound, a bang, a white flash invaded my vision, an enormous force threw me forward. Time for an instant simply, he finished. I felt my body being ripped from the seat, crushed, torn. The smell of hot metal, rubber, and gasoline permeated me. And then, nothing. But this nothing was not the end. On the contrary, I realized, with brutal clarity, that I was no longer inside my body. I looked down and saw my body, crushed, shrunken, pale, the eyes half open, the mouth half open, stained with blood. That was me, but at the same time it wasn't. I felt an indescribable terror. I tried to scream, I tried to run, to move, but I had no body anymore, only consciousness, only presence. I began to hear sounds that were getting farther and farther away, sirens, people screaming, tires screeching, but they seemed muffled, like they were underwater. And then, a strange force began to pull me upward. I tried to resist, I swear. I tried to hold on to life, to the car, to the ground, but it was useless. There was no ground left. There was nothing left to keep me trapped here. The panic was slowly replaced by a deep silence, an absolute void. It wasn't the dark, scary kind of void. It was a different kind of void. As if the very concepts of space, time, weight, and matter simply no longer existed. And then, in the middle of that nothingness, a light appeared. A golden, white, living light that seemed to breathe. It didn't come from a specific point. The space itself, it enveloped me, it passed through me, and even without a mouth, without a body, I felt a voice. Emily, you're not staying, but you need to see. You need to know. You need to prepare. It was at that exact moment that I realized I wasn't dead by chance. I was being taken to something. Something that wasn't meant for just anyone to see, and it was just the beginning. That light wasn't just something I saw, it was something I felt. She had texture, temperature, presence. It felt like an embrace without arms, a voice without sound, a living consciousness expanding around me. I felt like I was being sucked into it, but not violently. It was a gentle, irresistible pull, as if a forgotten part of me was finally coming home. The fear that had been paralyzing me until then began to dissolve, giving way to a peace I had never ever felt in my life. Little by little, I realized that I was no longer in that void. The space around me was transforming. The colors have changed. There were golden hues, shimmering blues, whites so pure they seemed made of liquid light. And then, I saw someone. It wasn't an apparition like in the movies with a solid figure walking toward me. It was a manifestation, a presence so intense that it seemed to fill every atom of this space. I needed no introduction. You knew. Emily. The voice sounded within me, without sound, without mouth, without language, but clearer than any word ever spoken on earth. You're here because you need to see. You need to remember. And when the time comes, you need to tell. Not to scare, but to wake up. At that instant, the light began to open, as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. In front of me, a portal, a kind of gigantic window, formed. Through her, I didn't see paradise. I didn't see angels nor flower gardens, at least not yet. What I saw was the Earth. But it wasn't Earth as we know it. It was a suffocating planet. The air seemed heavy, dark, dense. Lines of energy ran across the sky, like cracks in the glass of the firmament. And then I heard a phrase that was etched like fire in my soul. What you're about to see begins in late May 2025. And nothing, Emily, nothing will ever be the same again. My heart, or what was left of it, began to race. I trembled. I knew deep down that something terrible was about to be revealed, but at the same time, something necessary. The light grew brighter, and suddenly I was no longer looking from the outside, I was inside, within the vision. And that's when the terror began. Suddenly, I found myself in the middle of a city that I immediately recognized, Nova York. But something was wrong. The buildings were there. The screens were shining as always. The stock markets were buzzing. People were rushing from one side to the other, stuck in their routines, their goals, their own worlds. I looked around and realized no one understood what was about to happen. Then, without warning, I heard a dry sound, a snap, then another, and another. I looked up and saw, with my heart racing, the glass facades of the skyscrapers begin to crack. First, thin, almost imperceptible cracks appeared. Then, as if something invisible was pressing on the structures from the inside, the glass began to shatter. The Times Square screens began to flash. The stock market charts collapsed. Red codes, downward lines. The market was sinking, and fast. Heard a scream coming from the right side. Oh my God, the Nasdaq is plummeting. The Dow Jones dropped more than 3,000 points in minutes. The panic was instantaneous. People started pulling their phones out of their pockets trying to understand, but the screens were black. Then the worst happened. One of the buildings, one of those mirrored ones, the symbol of wealth and power, just fell apart. But it didn't fall like a building hit by an earthquake or an explosion. No, it imploded from within, as if the structure itself had rotted. Soon others began to crumble, one after another like dominoes. Each falling building seemed to echo like thunder in the soul of the city. The ground shook. The air was filled with dust and terror. I saw a woman kneeling in front of an ATM, desperately pressing buttons. The machine spat out blank papers. She screamed, tearing her hair. Everything I had, my years, my life, my money, everything. People ran to the banks. The doors were locked. They were banging, they were punching, they were shouting. Glass was shattering. Some were trying to break in. Others simply collapsed on the floor, crying. And then that voice, not from outside but from within, spoke again. When you put your faith in what is made of sand, the wind doesn't need to be strong to destroy. I was shaking. I was crying. It wasn't just a financial collapse, it was a collapse of everything that this civilization believed in. And that was just the first sign. The scene changed so quickly that I couldn't even understand how. In the blink of an eye, I was no longer on the streets of New York. Now I hovered over a huge harbor, and the sight that greeted me chilled my soul. Rows and rows of cargo ships, those colossal ones, were stopped, simply motionless, like abandoned carcasses in the middle of the ocean. No engine running, no horn, no sign of movement. The huge, Cranes at the ports were blocked. Containers were piling up, stacked as far as the eye could see, as if the entire world had forgotten it existed there. I approached, or maybe I was pulled, I can't say, and then I saw what seemed impossible. The transport lines had stopped. Soon the view expanded. Interstate highways were blocked. Trucks were parked on the shoulder, some overturned, others simply abandoned. I saw drivers sitting on the asphalt, heads down, holding their faces in their hands, desperate, not knowing where to go, what to do. And then I realized the world stopped, dry cut. A supermarket, shelves, empty. There was no bread, no milk, no meat, just a few crushed cans, a few torn packages, fought over tooth and nail by people who no longer seemed human. I saw a woman holding a moldy piece of bread as if it were gold. A child was crying beside her, asking for water, but there was none. Not there. Not anywhere. The lines were miles long, but they didn't form in front of the cashiers. They formed in front of closed doors, and people shouted. They fought. They pushed each other. I heard a hoarse male voice shout, "You have it, I know you have it, give it to me, I'll pay whatever you want." "I don't have it, I swear I don't have it," replied another, trembling. And then the fight began. Punches, screams, people throwing themselves at each other, everything, for a single bottle of water. And at that moment, I felt something crush my chest, like a pain that wasn't physical. It was spiritual, and the same voice that guided me, soft but full of authority, echoed within me. "You have built supply chains that cross oceans, that cross continents, and you have never asked yourself, what if one day it stops?" Greed made a few accumulate a lot, and now when the wheel stops, many are left with nothing. I started to cry. It wasn't just hunger. It wasn't just thirst, it was hunger, that Alma, a thirst for something that no one knew how to quench anymore. And then I realized, with a shiver that cut through my very core, this starts at the end of May 2025, and the world is not prepared. From one moment to the next, the scenario changed again. It was so fast, so abrupt, that for a second I felt like I was spinning in the void. When the image stabilized, I realized where I was. He was nowhere. There were no buildings, no cars, no people. Just an immense darkness, dotted with points of light that blinked in the sky, satellites. And then I saw the impossible happen. One by one, the satellites began to liquid. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It was as if something invisible, a force beyond all comprehension, was turning everything off. Each point of light went out, and when it did, a flaming trail crossed the sky, descending toward Earth like meteors, dead satellites. Suddenly, I found myself in a city again. I don't know which one, because now, there was no signal. None. Cell phones stopped. Screens frozen. TVs turned off. Radios in complete silence. Computers dead, only reflecting the faces of people who pressed buttons, restarted, hit the screen, screamed, and nothing. Nothing. I felt the pressure of something terrible taking over the air. A deafening silence. Not the silence of peace. It was the silence of panic, of emptiness. People looked at each other, completely lost. A woman waved her cell phone in the air, as if that would somehow bring the signal back. A man hit the router hard, then threw the device on the floor. But that wasn't all. I looked at the ATMs. Dead. Credit cards. Useless. No internet, no Wi-Fi, no data network, no satellites. And then the city changed its face. From a place of technology, information, and security, it became a field of panic, isolation, and despair. I saw neighbors who had never spoken to each other start to look at each other with suspicion. People walking aimlessly, looking at the sky as if searching for answers. But the sky was silent. And then that voice, Wargam, which was already engraved in me, spoke again, full of regret. When the connection is gone, you realize that you never really knew how to connect? You exchanged glances through screens, hugs through emojis, conversations through quick messages. And now the silence reveals to you how much you are alone. The emptiness I saw was not just technological. It was human. It was spiritual. A suffocating loneliness that spread like a black fog, enveloping every being, every street, every neighborhood, every city. And then I felt that vibration in the air again, like something was building up, something much bigger, much stronger, something that was yet to come. And that, I knew in that instant, would be devastating. The transition was instantaneous. The digital silence was gone, and suddenly I was nowhere and everywhere at the same time. The ground was shaking, but it wasn't just a tremor. It was as if the very spine of the planet was shaking, breaking. I felt the crack first, a sharp, dry sound coming from deep within the earth like bones breaking. I looked down and saw gigantic cracks opening up, streets ripped in half, buildings being swallowed alive, people running, falling, disappearing into the cracks. The scene seemed like a nightmare, but I knew it wasn't a dream. It was real. Suddenly, I was swept, or perhaps pulled, to a shore. It was a beach, and on the horizon a wall was forming. No, it wasn't a cloud, it was water. A wave. No, a wall of water. Bigger than any skyscraper I've ever seen. Bigger than any tsunami humanity has ever recorded. It was moving forward, slow, merciless, cold. And when it touched the ground, swallowed it all. Houses, cars, forests, people, everything submerged, everything taken away. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to escape. And then, before I could even process it, the scenery changed again. Now, fires, entire forests in flames, cities engulfed in flames. The sky was no longer blue. It was black, reddish, suffocating. The smoke made it impossible to breathe even for me who was no longer in my physical body. I heard the wind howl, but it wasn't wind, it was a hurricane. A spinning monster tearing roofs, uprooting trees, destroying everything it touched. And, most absurdly, they were many. Several hurricanes at the same time, in different places. Tectonic plates, winds, waters, fire, everything seemed to be out of control. And then I realized it wasn't just the Earth reacting. It was as if the planet itself was expelling a disease. The voice, that same voice, loving but firm, unquestionable, spoke within me. Creation groans. You heard it, but ignored it. You exploited. You sucked. You destroyed. And now she responds. Not out of revenge, but because order needs to be restored. I cried, I trembled, I wanted not to be there, I wanted not to see, but I could not close my eyes. The sky grew even darker, lightning slashed through the clouds, and then I realized this wasn't the end. No, this was just the prelude. I felt with every particle of my consciousness that something much greater, much stranger, much more incomprehensible was coming. And it was coming from the sky. And then, I looked at the sky. The air seemed to vibrate, not as a sound, but as if the very fabric of reality was shaking. It was like being inside a frequency, a vibration so strong, so intense that my very being seemed about to come apart. The sky was no longer blue, nor gray. It was a portal, a gigantic tear, opened in the veil of the cosmos. And through this, here, she was coming. A wave. But it wasn't water, nor wind, nor fire. It was pure energy. A gigantic mass, golden, silver, blue, impossible to describe. It was advancing, coming from something beyond the stars. A living wall, pulsating, electric, spiritual, as if the entire universe were breathing, and now exhaled. I felt this wave pass through the atmosphere. First a sound, a deep hum, which was not heard but felt in the chest, in the stomach, in the soul. Then, the light. The light touched the earth, and in that instant everything stopped. I saw cities freeze, people stopped in mid-step, cars stopped in the middle of the street, airplanes just falling from the sky. But the scariest thing wasn't the physical collapse. It was the internal collapse. When the wave touched the people, something started to happen. Something I can't even explain without getting goosebumps all over. The masks fell. I saw people being naked, not of clothes, but of their lies, of their secrets, of their hidden sins. Everything, absolutely everything, was left exposed. What was once hidden deep within the unconscious and came to light. I felt the pain of thousands, millions of souls being forced to look within. Their shadows, their fears, their guilt, their corruptions, their darkest desires, nothing could be hidden anymore. I saw people falling to their knees, screaming, holding their heads, as if they could escape from themselves. I saw others despairing, running, trying to escape, but there was nowhere to go. You can't run of you. And then, another part of the wave arrived, a part that wasn't destruction. It was wake up. I saw people falling to their knees, but this time in tears, not in pain, but of surrender. A surrender before the truth, before the divine, before what they really are. That voice echoed again, now with more force, as if it were the universe itself speaking. What was hidden is now revealed. What was a lie falls. What was true remains. And whoever is will see who they really are. My entire being trembled. I understood, with brutal clarity, the world would never be the same again. It wave arrives at the end of May 2025, and whoever is not prepared will fall apart inside. The cosmic wave had already passed through the earth, but what it unleashed was something far beyond any physical catastrophe or social collapse. She didn't destroy the buildings. That had already been done. She didn't silence the systems. That had already happened. What she did do, and did so in a brutally accurate manner, was force humanity to look within itself. I saw and felt how every human being was swallowed up by an invisible mirror, a mirror that reflected not faces, but souls. There was no longer any way to hide behind titles, religions, positions, diplomas, poses, social masks. That energy, alive, conscious, tore through all the false layers and left only the core. I saw people, adults, young, old, facing their worst selves. I saw mothers crying for the children they had emotionally abandoned. I saw businessmen, ashamed of the fortunes they had built on the backs of other people's hunger. I saw pastors, leaders, public figures naked before the naked truth of their hearts. And I saw something even more disturbing. I saw people who had never done anyone any harm, but who carried within themselves grudges, envy, judgments, old guilt, all of them manifesting themselves as real shadows. They took shape before their very eyes. Some shadows screamed, some whispered, some just stared, with that look that only the truth has. And then the internal collapses began. I saw people freaking out, running in circles trying to silence the voices coming from inside. People tearing off their clothes, throwing themselves to the ground, shouting nonsense. They were not possessed. They were free from the lies. Some tried to escape. They tried to hide inside churches, inside banks, inside their homes, but there was nowhere to hide. You can't run away from yourself. And then I saw the ones that fell to their knees, silent, with tears in their eyes, as if they were seeing the sky for the first time after years in darkness. They didn't scream. They just whispered a single word: forgiveness. That light that once exposed No, he cared, but not to everyone, only to those who surrendered. The voice returned, now like soft thunder. This is the judgment and also the last chance. Those who resist the truth there will be lost in themselves. Those who surrender will find the face of love. I cried, not because of pain, but because I knew how fragile a human being is when he is forced to look into his own eyes, without filters, without excuses, without masks. It comes to expose, but also to free. And whoever is not willing to be truthful will be crushed by the weight of their own lie. Just when I thought there was nothing left that could surprise me, the space around me began to distort. The golden light withdrew, the vibration died down, and a thick silence took over. But it wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was the silence that precedes the revelation. Then I saw, opening up before me, as if the very ground of the universe had split, a room. A hidden room. Hidden from humanity. Hidden from history. Hidden since before time was counted. The place seemed to not belong to the physical world. The walls were not made of stone or metal or anything that my eyes recognized. They were made of solid light. And inside that room there were files, yes, documents, scrolls, books, living holograms, codes, formulas, maps, secrets. In the center, a pedestal. On it, a single book. It wasn't just any book. It was the Book of Truth. My entire essence trembled. My being knew instinctively that that book contained what humanity has never been prepared to know. And then, the voice, that same voice that had accompanied me since the beginning, spoke. Everything that was hidden will be revealed. I approached. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The book opened by itself, and images, sounds, knowledge began to pour over me like a waterfall of light. I saw the true history of humanity. I saw forgotten civilizations. I saw technologies that today would be called magic. I saw that we were much more, and much, less Muna than we were ever told. I saw how knowledge was escondido, deliberately, by those who chose control, greed, domination, over truth. I saw that religions were manipulated, that science was mutilated, that governments, empires rose and fell not by chance, but as pieces in a much larger game. But the most shocking thing wasn't that. It was to see that the biggest lie was inside us. We have been taught to believe that we are small, fragile, separate, limited. But the truth is that we are infinite. We are part of the very consciousness that created the universe. We are made of the same material as light, and we forgot about it. And it is this forgetfulness that allowed everything I saw in the previous visions to happen. Then the voice spoke again, now with more authority than ever. At the end of May 2025, the veil will fall. What is hidden will be brought to light. What was a lie will crumble. And humanity, for the first time, will see who it really is. I was shaking. I knew that nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same again. The book closed by itself, as if to say, now you know. I felt a vibration grow around me. The golden light returned, this time more intense, more vivid, almost blinding. And in the middle of it, he was there. The same presence that accompanied me from the beginning, who led me through every vision, through every breakdown, through every revelation, Jesus. But not like the images we know on earth, not like paintings, not like statues. It was pure light, pure consciousness, pure love. He looked at me, and that look pierced every inch of my being. There was no more fear, no more doubt, no more resistance. Just true. Then, with a voice that seemed like the sound of 1,000 thunders, and, at the same time, the sweetest whisper I ever heard, he said, Emily, What you saw, you need to tell. They need to know. There is no more time to ignore. There is no more time to pretend. The time to choose is now. The end of May 2025 will be a milestone, a line in time, a watershed of eras. That which was hidden will be revealed. That which was false and will crumble. And that which is true will remain. I felt the words sink in, not as information but like tattoos on the soul itself. He continued, I did not come to bring fear, I came to bring truth. Fear is their creation. Truth is liberation. Collapse is not punishment. It is restoration. It is the cleansing of everything that was built on lies, on ego, on separation. What is coming cannot be avoided, but it can be navigated. And whoever crosses over will find a new world on the other side. A land restored, pure, alive. But that depends on each person. I was in tears, not from pain, but from an indescribable mixture of awe, love, shock, hope, and holy fear. He came closer. He touched my shoulder. I no longer had a body, but I felt it. It felt more real than anything I've ever felt in life. And then, he said the last sentence to me, the one I will never forget, the sentence that echoes within me to this day, and that now echoes for you who are listening to this. Emily, tell them, be careful at the end of May because everything begins, and nothing, absolutely nothing, will be the same again. The light began to close, everything faded away, the vibration diminished, and little by little I realized I was coming back. But you know, I wasn't the same anymore. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time,